Welcome to Uncaged, a show that celebrates thought leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. Today, we're speaking with Arun Kejariwal. Arun, it's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you, Van.
Now, today we're going to be talking about pharmaceuticals, research and development, commercialization in the pharma space. Arun has a lengthy career with all the major leading pharma companies, whether it be Merck, Pfizer, GSK, or Spark Therapeutics, where he is right now as the asset general manager for Huntington's disease and other CNS programs. We're excited to go through this as a space that's evolving rapidly. And as we've all been talking about healthcare issues over the last several years, Arun is right in the thick of it. So Arun, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about your background and your career.
Yeah, so a little bit about my background and career. So in terms of maybe I thought it would be good to kind of share about myself a little bit, right? So in terms of when I look at me as a person, as Arun, I'm very passionate about doing good for the society, right? So really the core fundamental value for me is I want to leave the world better than what I came into, right? So that's really the core of I guess my career, my education, everything is really based off of that, right? And that also that means two things. One is just in terms of the place itself, and the second is in terms of the people. And I'm truly a believer in this multiplier leadership, where as a person, my I guess goal or responsibility is also to build new leaders as we go along, right? So that's a little bit about myself and what my core values really are. But in terms of the career, of course, from education perspective, I have a bachelor's and a master's in chemical engineering, and then I have an MBA as well, right? So most of my career has, like you mentioned, Bant, have been in the pharmaceutical industry, right?
Yeah.
But I've also had the pleasure of like working in paper industry, automobile industry, and the chemical industry as well. That's very early in my career. Coming out of chemical engineering, and you can't really be not a chemical engineer when you do chemical engineering work, right? So that was a few years of my life and really enjoyed it. But getting into pharma was a game changer for me, right? So that's where I started at Merck, and so as a bench scientist, and then I progressed into more of a portfolio level or the more strategy level analysis and informing big decision in terms of where to invest in the pharma industry. All about R&D, right? Looking at when I started in the science, really how to build the facilities that can make those biologics and the complicated molecules that turn into medicine, and then moved on to really understanding long-range planning, things like that. So the key learning from there for me was really bringing people together, right? So if you look at my role in the biologics pilot plant, where things go so fast and so rapid, and it's highly operational. So bringing people together for a cause and making things happen quickly was really a big learning for me, and how to really do that, right? It's one thing that you are able to do it, but then bringing everyone else along and be able to do things, it's totally a different ballgame, right? So that was a big thing I learned at Merck. And then when I moved up in terms of really understanding how big pharmas make decisions so that everything they do is sustainable, right? At the end of the day, pharma industry is a great business, and to me, it's really a very noble cause, doing good to the society, but we should be able to do it in a sustainable way. And that means we also look at more financial end of things, right? So that's really my Merck experience for 10 years, but that was not enough for me. I thought that's great, science is good, but I really want to understand what happens in the commercial end of things. Really, once the product is in the market, how do we sustain the business, right? And what are the things that I can learn from there and really help the end-to-end like pharma industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I joined Pfizer. I spent 10 years there, and that is another 10 years of great experience and learning, looking more from how to take a drug into the market. So really from a post proof of concept, the scientific risks have been somewhat resolved, taking that and understanding the regulatory environment in different parts of the world, and then launching that product there, right? And I got an opportunity to really have a global role working in Latin America and Russia, Japan, really understanding those markets while launching a new modality, right? So biosimilars, things like that. So I'm going to pause here and just want to make sure, does that make sense? Any questions?
No, I mean, I think it's all amazing. I think that you can see that wealth of experience really leading into what you're working now on at Spark Therapeutics, which seems to be working on really some of the more leading edge stuff in the gene therapy space. So tell me a little bit more about how you're applying all that learning from R&D and rolling out the kind of commercial innovation at Spark.
Oh, that's very, very interesting, Brandon. I think, that's where the thing about pharma industry, I always had this thing in me in terms of, yes, we are doing good, but at the same time, this is a medicine that we are making that everyone has to take it regularly on a chronic basis. So it's like that gets reminded of the disease or the suffering that they have on a regular basis, right? So while at Pfizer is when I first got exposed to gene therapy, and I was part of the team that really developed Pfizer's gene therapy strategy, right? And that really opened up for me was, oh, this is a place where we get to the root of things and has the potential to cure the disease. In other words, give it a shot, and then the person just forgets about the disease, right? So that's the promise of gene therapy. And I was like, well, this is the place I gotta be, right? So that's when I started to explore where I can really make gene therapy happen. And I didn't have to look far. Spark Therapeutics, they're pioneering gene therapy. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I need to go to that place and make gene therapy happen, right?
And, you're focused on some of the topics like Huntington's disease specifically. Tell me about really what's happening in terms of genetic research in terms of Huntington's and how that's being rolled out.
Yeah, so in terms of maybe I'll take a little step up and say the CNS in general, right? Or neuroscience in general, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of scientific development or research that has gone in the last 10 years or so, right? Where people have a lot more better understanding of the neurological diseases or the neuroscience in general, right? That research has really set up very nicely for us to capitalize on that and develop a treatment or a cure for it, right? So that's really the area that really I put myself into, is the CNS or neuroscience is where I really want to be, because that's really another, loosely speaking, is the next oncology, if you will, because the science has really done well in the last 10 years, right? So applying that science to develop cure is what I'm doing now. And because it's the gene therapy, one of the easiest thing, I would say easiest as an easier thing, is really going to diseases that are monogenic and genic diseases that where you really need to tackle one part of the problem, in the sense it's a monogenic is a little bit easier to understand and then develop a treatment for it.
What are the treatments? I mean, how do you roll out a solution?
Yeah, so here's first of all, especially for Huntington's, right? If you look at, we have known for a long time what causes the disease. There's a mutation of a gene, right? But we have not been able to find real treatment. At this point, there is no treatment. So unmet need in the Huntington disease is really, really high, right? And this is a disease that really does not impact just one person, the person with the mutation, but impact the whole family, the society, the person that the person is, right? So what we are doing, and one of the approaches is really getting to the root of it and saying, how can we really stop what the mutation is causing? In terms of what mutation does is it forms a Huntington protein, which is a mutated protein. That's a bad protein, right? So how can we genetically go in there and give that one treatment where it's going to stop producing that mutant Huntington protein, or it's going to slow it down or stop or make it less of a mutant Huntington protein, right? So that's how we are kind of tackling the root of it.
But I mean, Arun, let me kind of, I guess, state my ignorance here. I mean, what does this net out to be? I mean, is this a procedure? Is this a pill? I mean, how does this get rolled out?
Yeah, so it's actually a treatment where we have to get to the target region that's within the brain, and because putamen and cortex are the two target regions in the brain, which are the most affected part of the, I guess, brain for Huntington disease, right? So what we do is, in order to give the treatment, we got to get to those target regions, right? And currently, what we do is we have to do a surgery, which is neurosurgery, getting directly into the brain, right? And inject the therapy, which is a biologic therapy, inject that into that part of the brain, right? And the promise is a one-time injection, and that really the cells continue to be there forever, so to speak, and tackle the disease.
Arun, I've thought a lot about this, which is that, there was so much focus over the last 3 years, certainly on the virus, on COVID, that I've just been curious on how that impacted R&D and innovation and really some of the other areas that are so critical in the broader pharma and medical space. And I noticed that you stepped into your current role right at the beginning of COVID. Tell me a little bit about that experience and really how that maybe presented some challenges and maybe opportunities.
Yeah, so definitely. So it's the way I think of this is the two pieces. One is the people aspect of it, joining a new company altogether, and then really building that relationship and getting to know everyone in a remote setting is extremely, extremely challenging. It's something new, right? We have never done this. We always used to be face to face and make trips to be there so that we can get to know people, right? So that aspect was pretty interesting. It took me a little longer to get to know people, right?
Yeah.
And more importantly, also sometimes you feel like you know them over the Zoom setting.
Yeah.
But when there really some issues happen, you quickly realize, well, I don't know the person as much as I think I knew the person, right? So that's a learning by itself, right? But yeah, it took little time, but the good thing was that Spark is a smaller company. And everyone was so open to understanding, well, new people are coming in, and the best way for them to do is have Zoom or other things. Everyone had their video cameras on, that you get to at least a little bit more than just voice. You get to see people and get to see expressions and get to understand a little bit more of each other. So that was very good. On the other end, especially with COVID, all the resources, right, that really work on all aspects of drug development, including regulators and even hospitals for the clinical trials and everything else. Even the animals for study that we do, preclinical study, the labs and everybody was two things. One was COVID had limited their ability to do things, and second, the treatments that were being developed for COVID, they took all of their resources, right? So they were focusing on there. So I would say that had significant impact on other stuff. Of course, from a clinical trial perspective, the clinical trials couldn't be conducted, right?
I've also often thought that maybe we're going to have a bit of a blip in the data because, and maybe I'm wrong, but I do quite a bit of research myself, not in the medical space, but is it possible, and maybe I'm wrong, that during COVID that perhaps people were there for other, illnesses, other sicknesses, but at the same time, they might have been listed as a COVID patient, and perhaps then that will kind of throw out of whack our data on some of these broader diseases. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I've been thinking about that maybe there's a challenge there.
Yeah, and there's certainly that aspect of it, and that's more closer to the diseases that have similar symptoms to COVID, right? But not necessarily for the CNS stuff that I'm working on, which is more of a genetic thing, and their symptoms are very different, right? So for those aspects, definitely there's a little bit of separation there. But I'm with you. There definitely is going to be one of those things where people look back and say, did tell people really have COVID, or did they have something else, or they had something else that didn't really get addressed because COVID was on top of everyone's mind, right?
Yeah. So there'll be an asterisk, I think, next to some of the data. Yeah.
But one of, I would say the positives coming out of COVID kind of a situation is to definitely the industry was able to get a treatment in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Right? So that's actually a big learning, and people are starting to see how is that possible, right? So even from a regulatory perspective and a clinical trial perspective, there are a lot of things people are starting to do well. There's a remote monitoring, or how can we do things faster?
I mean, such a great point, Arun. I mean, honestly, one of the things that gets forgotten is what an incredible human achievement
Oh yeah,
it
totally.
was to move. I
Yeah.
mean, you live in this world, how regulated it is and how many steps and checks and balances there are. But to move that quickly was just stunning.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Arun, I mean, as we step into 2023 here, what are your hopes for the future? What's on the docket?
Yeah, I personally think in terms of the development and things that we're doing, and especially CNS space, is what I really like, study more and learn more about, and look stuff in the future. There's definitely going to be a lot of things happening in this space, right? For example, even the Huntington disease, there's so many programs now in the clinic, and everyone's trying to take different approaches to treating them, right? And that's
Cool.
that's really going to yield something. I'm really hopeful about it, right? It's going to yield something, right? And same at the higher level in the CNS, like Parkinson's disease as well as Alzheimer's. As you may have heard of, especially for Alzheimer's, we had some recent approvals, and some other drugs have been really doing good. But I think that's just the first step, right? From here on, you'll definitely see a better treatment, things like that come through in the CNS space. Definitely.
Well, Arun, if someone wanted to learn more about really, I'd say R&D in general, as well as commercialization of pharma products, as well as kind of some of the stuff that you're working on specifically at Spark right now, where's the best place to reach you?
Best place to reach me would be, of course, LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and you'll see contact information is right there. So it's the easiest way to reach me would be, that's really the way to go, right?
Excellent. Well, Arun, thank you so much for being on Uncaged today. We've been speaking with Arun Kejariwal. He is the asset general manager for Huntington's disease and other CNS programs at Spark Therapeutics. He has a long history in the pharma space, working for GSK, Pfizer, Merck, and really looking at all aspects of research and development, bringing drugs to market, commercializing them, and really thinking about all the issues around that and evolving that model. And what an interesting moment to be working in that space as we take the learnings from what happened through COVID and apply it into other areas. And certainly working in gene therapy and genetics is what is really a bleeding edge space. Arun, thank you so much for being on Uncaged today, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.